guys, it's Sean and Jackie of Open Love 101, and welcome to our show. Today, we're sitting with Beth Darling, aka Beth Liebling, or something like that.
Yes, perfect. Liebling. My last name is Liebling, which in German means darling or loved one.
No.
Nuh-uh.
Yes.
Is that what? No.
Yes. That's why my shop was Darling Way. Yes, Darling. So I like Darling, and Darling is easier to spell than Liebling. So I just started using Beth Darling. Yeah.
Oh,
that is super cute.
That is cool.
Okay, can I be even sappier?
Yes.
Yeah. Beth in Hebrew, right? I'm a nice Jewish girl. Beth is house of God. So I am a house of God darling. Talking about sexy. I know. I had an Orthodox rabbi tell me I'm doing God's work. I was like, I'm trying. Right? This is what I think I was put on the world for. Yes. Anyway.
Sending out the message.
Yes. It's all about love.
Yeah. Well, and we've worked with you a few times. Right?
I know.
You've done some webinars for us. And, and like you mentioned, at one point you had like this great shop. Yeah. You've written a book.
Yes.
You definitely are spreading the word for sure.
I am trying. I preach and teach love, right? And that's the same thing y'all do. This is why I fell in love with you before I even met you. But your mission, the way that you take it personally like I do, you share yourselves like I do. I think it's phenomenal. And I think it's really important for people to see. And especially y'all have this amazing love affair after however many years of being married. I've forgotten how many, but it's a love affair, and it's absolutely stunningly beautiful and a pleasure to watch. So I have nothing but admiration.
Well, thanks.
Thank you very much for that. And you're right. I do love to share myself.
Yeah, that's good. In so many ways.
Not even touching that.
Oh, you've already touched it, I'm sure. Oh, wait. I don't know that I've seen her blush before.
Oh my gosh. Well, here's the thing. So we know who you are.
Yeah.
And some of our listeners know who you are as well. Some of the people that have been lucky enough to be involved in some of our webinars that we've had with you. But for those of our listeners that have no idea who you are, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So I'm 56 years old. I've got 5 kids. I've got 2 grandkids. Before this career, talking explicitly about love, sex, and relationships, I was a board certified divorce lawyer. Right?
We were just talking about that, and I love that because I don't know if that was the catalyst that sent you over to the other side to try to save these.
So it actually all stems from the same thing, which is that I grew up in a family that was very dysfunctional, didn't have any real love. I say I grew up with an intellectual version of love. I know my parents loved me, but we didn't feel it. And then they got divorced when I was 13, and it was awful. And I knew then that there should be a better way for people to get divorced. So, but frankly, preceding that, I was this kid who was so fascinated by sex because, again, with no love, and I craved love, and there was no physical affection. So I thought the only way you would get physical affection was through sex. So I was obsessed with sex early on. But when my parents threw 3 books at me for my sex ed when I was, 10 years old or 12 years old, I knew I wanted to write books about sex for parents and kids to help them talk to each other.
Really?
Yeah. But you don't, right? How many kids do you know, smart kids, say, oh, I want to talk about sex when I grow up, right? That is just not okay. So no. So it was always, I would say, psychology or law. And then I decided to go law. Then after I stopped practicing law, because I don't like to fight, I just kind of was like, I actually I had half a master's in marriage and family therapy before I did law school. And then stopped that, went to law school, and then came out and started an online PhD program in psychology. And it was finally my own counselor who said, this is ridiculous. And he didn't cuss much. And his words were, you don't need another fucking degree, Beth. He's like, you've been coaching, because I'd been doing divorce coaching. And I said, as a divorce lawyer, if you do it well, it's 10% law and 90% counseling. And that was the part I liked. So,
that's really cool.
So this is the perfect merger. Yeah. And I just learned so much about relationships. And what I saw was good relationships that just went bad, and they get divorced because I say nobody teaches us how to love.
Yeah.
Literally.
You mentioned a sex ed book for teens. Did you ever write that?
I haven't written that one yet. No. So that's going to be a little bit further down the road. I have a list. I'm working on a book right now. Then I have another one already planned out that as soon as I finish the second one, I'll start on the third one. But to get into the teens, especially these days, it's so fraught with difficulty and whatever that I'm going to hold off on that. People need to understand who I am. They have to have some trust in me before they're going to be okay talking
About
to their
their
kids.
kids,
Yeah,
yeah.
and stuff.
Well, we might have some
Yeah.
interest in collaborating with you on that, because that's something Jack and I are interested in. Is it's really lacking in this country,
Yes.
and if we
Yeah.
can't reach them through the schools, then maybe we can reach them through some kind of online materials or books. And there's a handful of them out there, but nothing that's great, I don't think. So
Right. And I want something that's parents and kids and stuff. And,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
and I've told you, I think the first time I met you, I get very enthusiastic, but I would work with y'all in almost any way. So whether it's books, podcast, I've told you that. I think truly I have so much respect for you. So yeah, let me know. We'll make something good happen anytime you're ready.
So when you transitioned from, practicing law and then like delving into this, how long ago was that?
So I stopped practicing family law in 2002.
Okay.
And we had an excuse. We picked up 5 kids and moved to Paris right after 9/11. My mother had brain cancer. It was like, fuck this life.
Wow.
We're going. So we did that for a year, came back, and I had shut my practice down. I was like, I gave up my board certification. That was how I knew I'm not going back to this, because I was having dreams about my kid clients. And
Yeah.
a third of my docket was representing kids in different cases. So it was exhausting. But then there was a span, and I did some trademark stuff, and that was boring as whatever. But it was when I got divorced myself after 23 years of marriage and 23 years of what I call BMS, which is boring married sex. And I'm pretty sure people, even if you've never been married, if you've been in a relationship more than about a year, you know about boring married sex, BMS. So it's not the married part that's the key, right? It's the boring. And I was like, okay, what do I do? How do I do better? Because I was open-minded. I wouldn't have judged you. I just judged myself. I had shame about my body. I had
Right.
shame about my desires. I'm into BDSM now. I didn't even know that was an option, but I sure as hell wouldn't tell anybody then that I wanted to be spanked. That didn't seem okay. So it was this whole journey, and that journey, I started with this idea of a store because I needed a place, physically a place to go to find this stuff. And then I sold the shop a year ago because really my passion has always been preaching and teaching. And so running a retail shop wasn't my forte.
Yeah, because you do a lot of workshops now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. I love it. I love it. I coach individuals and couples, and I teach workshops for, a zillion different. I've taught for the American Society of Mechanical Engineers.
Wow.
That I was about masculine and feminine energy.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And how we get things done.
And on that topic, you've done some webinars with us at
Mhm.
Open Love 101 Plus, which is our sponsor today. And so let's go ahead and cut
Yes.
to our sponsor, let them have a little word, and we'll come back and talk to you, Beth. Hey guys, thanks for watching our videos and listening to our podcast. We hope you're enjoying our show. But do you want something more? Do you have questions about open relationships and the swinger lifestyle? Then you need to ask the expert, and that's her. Jackie Melfi. She's written a book called Swinger Lifestyle: The Questions You're Afraid to Ask, by Jackie Melfi. It is full of questions that were sent to us by our listeners and our readers, and then Jackie responding to them in long form here throughout this book. We've had some great reviews about her book. It's amazing. Please be sure and find it on Amazon. I think you can buy hard copies. You'll see the link on our website or lulu.com. See ya. Okay, we're back with Beth. Good to see you.
Thank you. Yes, so glad to be here.
Okay, so the thing that interests me, I kind of got before we sat down today to do this, I got a list of some of the workshops that you offer, and one of them that really clicked. I know John and I both kind of went through this list of what you offer, and you had one about intimacy.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
the 5. What was it? I can't remember.
5 kinds of intimacy.
Yes, the 5 kinds of intimacy, and I'm like, it's one of those things that
Yeah.
you're like, well, what's the 5 thing? Now I want to know what the 5 things are.
Well, I did. I got online and looked. And
Oh, good.
but there's more. There's 5 kinds. There's 8 kinds. There's someone that says there's 15 kinds. I mean, there's all different people. There's multiple different types of 5 kinds. So we want to hear about your 5 kinds, of course. And
Yeah. Thank you. Because, I'm so excited because this is my second book. This is literally the one that I am working on right now, and that I hope, that I plan I plan to launch in January of 2023.
Sweet.
So, and I know there are a bunch of different things out there about intimacies, but what's happened is that even the experts don't agree and don't clarify what intimacy is. And so everybody's bandying this word about like, oh, I don't feel intimate, or when did you have intimacy, right? We use it as code euphemism for sex and
Right.
all sorts of other stuff, but it is so vague. And again, I have this mix of romantic and logical in my brain, right? So when working with people and trying to help them create loving, lasting relationships, it's like, okay, what do they need? And everybody's like, oh, I don't know. And they'll say love and communication. I was like, I can communicate my order at Burger King really, really well. And that does not convey any sort, right? Doesn't guarantee intimacy,
No.
doesn't involve any love. So that's great. What do we do? The 5 love languages
Right.
are great, but still I can do an act of service for somebody I've just met right now. And that doesn't necessarily involve love or intimacy. So, so my 5 kinds of intimacy are what I think are basically the fundamental, the whole wheel of what a happy, healthy, lasting relationship actually requires.
Okay.
All right. And so they are, first of all, there are 5 kinds, and recognize they're separate and distinct.
Okay.
And so just like when I need protein, I can eat sugar all day long, but it doesn't satisfy, right? I'm not getting what I need. That's what you have to remember from these 5 types, because oftentimes people are like, oh, I'll just do this one, not that. All right. So physical, emotional, sexual, romantic, and spiritual. Okay. Physical, emotional, sexual, romantic, and spiritual.
And you're saying, as far as you're concerned, all 5 of those things need to be operating.
Yes.
It's not like the 5 love languages where you test high in one specific area or your partner tests high in one specific area.
Well, it is, but that's not good enough. That's not going to get you.
Right.
So what I say is actually, I think that these days in our culture, I think most heterosexual relationships are actually set up for failure because what men have grown up with is they're taught to avoid emotional intimacy unless it's in the midst of sexual intimacy.
Right.
Right. If you're busy getting it on, then a guy can say, oh, I love you. This is awesome. You make me feel so good. I feel like such a man. You're mine. And can be very open and vulnerable emotionally. But women, we're not taught that, right? What are women taught? We're taught to seek emotional intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we have it, to use sexual intimacy as a reward.
Yeah. And that's so interesting because, what we teach people isn't necessarily their natural state.
Right.
Right. Because
Yes.
we teach men that they're not emotionally connected, but actually they're highly emotionally connected.
Absolutely.
That's really the only way a lot of times that men are going to have a relationship, for all of his organs to be working how he wants them to, he has to have an emotional connection.
That's a great point, Jackie. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's why we have to understand these 5 kinds of intimacy, because again, when one is lacking, you won't necessarily be getting what you want. So in my marriage, no emotional intimacy, none on either part. And I didn't know this then, right? So we're blind. But my husband was constantly looking for sex, more sex, more sex. Didn't matter. We were having sex 2 or 3 times a week for 23 years, which is way above, the norm.
National average.
And yet it wasn't fulfilling to him.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why he kept thinking that sugar protein, let me just eat more sugar. Right.
Right.
And so this is what I say. So a lot of my work, and we'll talk more if it's okay, a few minutes about what these intimacies are. But I will say a lot of my work with individuals and couples is to teach women to feel emotionally intimate with their clothes off and men to feel emotionally intimate with their clothes on. Right. And that's hard to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
Do you think that we have a good emotional connection in and outside of the bed?
I do. Yeah, actually, John was probably the first guy that I'd ever been with that Like I would have classified him as highly emotional.
Yep.
Like
Mhm.
I would have classified him as being intimate. And a lot of times I classified myself as being more of like a guy,
Yes.
which is
Right.
so wrong to
Right.
do that
You did
because
do that in the beginning. That's true.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Because I thought because I'm so sexual, I must be more masculine,
Right.
which was it's bizarre that that's what we teach.
Yes. Right. And this whole idea, this is where, and this is a whole nother topic, the idea of sex positivity.
Yeah.
Right? I'm very much in favor. I think sexy should be a really important part of life. In fact, I think love, sex, and romance are the best parts of life. And somehow humans were so foolish that we turn it into the most shameful taboo.
Right.
But this idea that we should be able to enjoy sexy without emotional, I think actually does us a disservice.
Yeah.
Because to me, we want the whole package. And that doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. But anyway, that's a whole nother thing. So, but recognize that and just realize, because these 5 kinds of intimacies, they also apply to ourselves. They really apply to ourselves. But so let's talk physical intimacy.
Okay.
What do you guys think physical intimacy is?
What do I think of physical intimacy?
Yeah. What do you think it is?
I would say one that could be touch.
Okay. Right.
I definitely, yeah.
Kissing is touch. I mean, any kind of touch that involves that. It's
Right.
not necessarily sexual intimacy, but
That's right.
But that's where my brain would automatically go is sexual.
Yes. Right. And that's the thing. And that, believe me, I'm telling you, I thought all touch had to be sexual. I thought nudity had to be sexual because this is but it doesn't. Right. So there's also this misperception. If you did research about intimacy, you probably saw a lot of experts talking about how you have to be willing to be intimate and stuff. Again, bullshit. Think of Will Smith at the Oscars. If you tell me that wasn't an intimate moment, right? We saw into Will Smith. We saw his emotion. We saw things that were vulnerable. He didn't want us to. That was intimacy, and it wasn't voluntary. So intimacy can be when you willingly hold hands, but physical intimacy can also be on a crowded bus or train. We don't like it. In fact, that's how you know it's there, is when people are like, they're looking up, they're looking down, they're doing everything they can to shut people out because we're not comfortable with that kind of intimacy.
Why? Why are we not comfortable with that kind of intimacy? What are we teaching that makes us feel awkward?
Or is it natural?
I'm sure there's something about natural that people, every animal needs their little space, that when we can feel a little threatened, when we don't feel as in control if there are a bunch of people around us and stuff. So I'm sure there's some biological imperatives in that. And if you've been through assault or trauma, you're even more sensitive to people being close, et cetera. So I think it's just important to recognize it and to realize, because what happens in relationships is we don't notice things. We don't notice. And so, for example, think of, I don't know if you know, couples that don't get along. They've never gotten along. They don't like each other, right? But they've been together forever. One dies. And what happens to the one who's remaining? You know what they'll miss the most? They'll be like, I just miss them being in bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Because being in bed with somebody, even if you roll over and face the other way and try to pretend they're not there, that's a level of physical intimacy. Yeah. And yet they've overlooked that. And we don't make use of it. So then emotional intimacy, you asked about that emotional and stuff, right? It's sharing things that we feel a level of vulnerability. Say if there's feelings around, whether we're acknowledging them or not, that's generally an intimacy. That's a sign that there's something there. So when I order at Burger King, I don't feel intimate. I'm not worried about what people think about my order. When somebody in another couple might, if they share that they're swingers, that might be an emotional intimacy with somebody, but you guys share that openly with everybody. So it's not such an intimacy for you, right? So the same thing in different situations isn't always intimate. We have to recognize. Women tend to find and feel and appreciate emotional intimacy through talking and conversation or hugging or crying or something. But men, this I love. You know how many women complain about, well, I'm with him. We're in the car ride. He doesn't even talk to me. We have breakfast or coffee together. He won't even talk to me. All he does is read the paper or he's on his phone. Like, it doesn't matter if I'm there, but he gets mad if I'm not there. Right? You've heard this, right?
No, I've lived that.
You've lived that. Yeah. Okay.
You know, because it is so true. You know, John will tell me something. You know, maybe he found out some information, and my whole thing is, oh, tell me the entire conversation from hello to goodbye, and he's just like, what? I mean, I found out the piece of information that we needed to find out. I don't even know what happened outside of that. And for me, it's like, oh, but you know, for me, I'm missing all those juicy parts of the story.
Yeah, so many times she was like, you didn't ask that question? Like they told you didn't ask why? I'm like, no, I just.
Yes, I totally know. And there's this feeling of like, I want more intimacy. I want to be part of this, right? I want to know.
Yeah.
And yet men actually, when they're sitting there, and a lot of times when they're not talking and stuff, the fact is for men to be able to be present, to not have any expectations placed on them, to not have to come up with conversation, to not have to defend themselves against why they don't know more, for them not to have to be clever or try to create interest in somebody else, to simply be, that can feel really emotionally intimate for a man.
You know, it's interesting that you'd say that, because there's also been situations that we've been at the table and John's eating and I'm eating, and you know, maybe I can tell he's thinking about something, and I'll get done and I'll get up and he'll be like, well, where are you going? And I'm thinking, well, I mean, we're just sitting here. And you're right. I mean, I'm not cluing in that just me sitting there is maybe an intimate thing for you. Yeah. And I don't know, maybe you don't even realize it either, but it's
probably not.
No conversation needs to be happening. Right. It's just the presence of that other person.
There's no doubt about it. I do recognize that. It is important.
Yeah.
To me. Yeah.
Where are you going?
Yes. Right. And suddenly, though, when you understand this, then it becomes very easy to be like, okay, great. Now I am important. Me allowing him to just exist and me loving and respecting and admiring him when he's doing nothing.
Right.
That is a huge gift and a blessing to him. Right?
Yeah.
And it's not that there's one way that's right or one way that's wrong. It's just that, again, you have to know your partner, because so sometimes you need to sit there in silence and be there. And sometimes he needs to know, hey, I got to give you your emotional fix, right? What do we need and how do we do? And that way we're just more on the same page, and everybody can get their needs met, which is important.
Right.
Instead of blowing it off and thinking one's not important.
Right.
And it's funny because in marriage or committed relationships, our culture sort of assumes, okay, now we're in there, emotional intimacy is a given. Of course, right? If I say, there are a lot of women who will brag, oh, I haven't had sex with my husband in 3 weeks or whatever. And all the friends are, oh yeah, I don't want it either and stuff. I say, really? So if your husband went around and said, I haven't talked to my wife in 3 weeks, you'd be like, what a fucking asshole.
Yeah.
Dump him. No way. He's not paying attention to your needs.
Right.
So these are all important. They're different. They're all important.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Okay. So sexual, so yes, it can be, really deliberately, intentionally sex, but it also can be your gynecologist with their fingers up you. It can be rape. Okay, let's face it. Rape is incredibly intimate. And to deny that is absurd. So when people, again, say, oh, intimacy is voluntary. No. Intimacy can be forced upon you. Absolutely can. And it's powerful and it needs to be addressed. And you're right for feeling invaded and stuff. And so I think that's a really key important. But also,
so are you saying to be able to recognize and acknowledge what actually happened?
Yes. And that it's not just nothing. When people say, oh, it's just a physical thing. No. We have around sexual is a lot different.
Happened. Yeah.
Right. It's different than being punched in the face.
Yeah.
That's a physical intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not necessarily sexual.
Right. Do you think that that's something that we're not talking about?
Yes.
With victims of that act?
Yes, absolutely. Because I think that that's what then causes them to shut down more during acts of sex. Otherwise, right? Is this somehow they think that they should be able to have sex without it feeling intimate, and that's wrong.
What you're introducing is a little different, I think, than what probably even what I was thinking when I think of intimacy as something loving, even if it's sexual,
Positive.
it can be yes, something positive. So to incorporate both of those words together, I almost feel like magnets are happening, like opposing magnets, and that's not what you're saying. So I can see how if we're not addressing, and I know we're kind of getting off tangent here, but this is kind of important. I think if that's happened to somebody and we're not addressing that emotional aspect of what's happened, that can be a key element in someone's recovery.
Yeah.
I mean, because when we say intimacy, we're not talking about something loving, but we are talking about something that's going to affect you physically and emotionally. And if we don't acknowledge it, that there could be some damage there that doesn't ever get
maybe. I mean, Beth, you can answer this, but so along those lines, would verbal abuse, that's intimate as well.
Mm-hmm.
Calling someone names is intimate.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not a good kind of intimacy.
That's
and
right.
It can really hurt someone in the long term.
Right.
Exactly. But the more you know someone, right, the more able you are to wound them with emotional.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's that. Oh, it could be as simple as, oh, you look like you might have gained a pound or two. Right. To some people, no big deal. Okay, fact, whatever. Some people, that will send them into a tailspin of just epic proportions.
Mm-hmm.
It's intimacy.
Well, I think about articles that we have either, articles that I've written or stories that have been done, and then we get all this negative feedback. I could give two craps about it. I mean, it doesn't bother me.
Good for you.
Right?
Initially it did. It took something to get used to.
I was going to say it always would.
But it's if somebody that I know and care about, if they say something to me that I feel like is along those lines, it's crushing. So you're right. The more intimate you are with somebody, the more vulnerable and open you are, or the more affected you are, the more invested you are.
Right. The more power.
The more power. Yes. I mean, so it really gives a different vantage point of when we start talking about intimacy, there is a huge power dynamic going on from both people. I mean, because you can take that intimacy and really use it in a way that's not going to grow something.
No, definitely.
Well, it'll grow something. It just may not be something
just,
positive. Again, right? That's the thing. And so it's just foolish to not recognize the good and the bad.
Yeah.
And this is the problem. So we need to be very clear, and we need to be very specific with our words.
Yeah.
Because again, I say you can know a lot of people like my ex-husband and I, right, who are having a lot of sexual intimacy and yet aren't feeling anywhere emotionally intimate and aren't feeling satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
I kind of think maybe there's something to this that relates to sex addiction, but that's, again, right, can feed when you're just looking and hoping to get something out of one act, but it's not there.
And so maybe you're going to talk about this, but I may be jumping the gun here. But so then we have this interesting phenomenon that happens. So you have this, what we would classify as an intimate relationship with another person.
Yeah.
But then we're not freaking honest.
Right.
Right. So then there's so much stuff in this intimate relationship that's not talked about.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's like dual things going on.
I think that's what's made our relationship great is when we've come across those barriers, we've definitely communicated them and trying to work our way through them and make changes within, I've and you have too tried to change the way we deal with each other when it comes to something that's touchy.
Well, and we try to make sure, because we talk a lot about communication and how important that is,
yes.
But it's not nearly as important as comprehension, right? Because I can tell you something all day long, but if you're not understanding what I'm telling you, it's not.
Yeah, that's right. I say you can speak great Chinese, and I'd be like, sure, brilliant, wonderful. That's
she's
awesome.
saying that's because that's how I am. Yeah. I don't comprehend what she's saying all the time, and it takes a minute.
Well,
but you have to be willing to do it,
right? And you actually have to understand the language, and that's what I'm trying to do with the 5 kinds of intimacy: is to give a working terms so people can be very specific.
Right.
Because this idea, people who are sharing a bed together and they'll come in and say, oh, we haven't been intimate in forever long. I'm thinking, okay, wait, let's just think about this because I don't really agree with you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of intimacy. You just don't recognize it as such.
Yeah, that's true.
And you're confusing things. And so let's be specific. And the joy is now once you have these 5, and again, I've seen this work. It's like, it's so cool, actually, I have to say. Couples can then identify what's lacking and we can fix it, which is amazing. And yeah. So, okay. So let's finish out, right?
Yeah,
with romantic. Okay. So, and recognize that sexual, again, could be phone sex, right? Sex,
True.
right? Can be pen pals. It could be, it's us maybe talking. Well, certainly it's what I do with my clients where there's a big level of sexual intimacy because we're talking about their sexy life.
Right.
And that is
Right.
vulnerable. It's not what they're going around telling everybody else and stuff.
Right.
Okay. So all sorts of different ways. And then romantic. So romantic, I'll do John. What is your version? Not a woman's, not what you do for Jackie romantic, but tell me what you think is romantic.
Like what I think is romantic for myself, what I love.
Yeah.
You know, I love, Jackie will do special things for me. Like last night we had a conversation earlier about something I was going through yesterday. You and I did. And I was, bothered by it. I wasn't myself.
Yeah.
And Jackie took time to just massage me. And so there was some physical there, but to me, it was really romantic as well.
Okay. Why was it romantic, if you don't mind?
Because it was loving. It was selfless. At least, initially, I think it's selfless. It may turn into being something that's selfish as well as it progressed, but
bonus for me.
Pleasurable, right? That's okay. Okay, so it was loving. Okay, what? Because typically, Jackie, if I asked you, what's romantic? Women usually have a much easier time answering. What do you think is romantic?
Yeah, I mean, to me, romance is John's full attention. Just kind of being the center of this kind of myopic view of the two of us. It's just kind of us and everything else just kind of fades away. Just that attention.
Okay.
I like that.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That is beautiful.
Yeah, I really like so I think too often people get romance confused, Hallmark chocolates, flowers and stuff, or diamonds and whatever. We have this checkoff list. And I think it's much more than that. Romance is defined in the dictionary as like an ambiance, an energy, an excitement, unexpected.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Surprise.
How about
mystery.
coffee the other day we had?
What?
The coffee we had the other day. It was surprising. We drove over to this new coffee place and
and it was very intimate. And it was, but I wouldn't have classified it as that. I will today, but then I would not have seen that as something intimate
or romantic.
Sitting there. It was just, we're just sitting here having coffee. But no. There was a lot of stuff going on.
It gives me goosebumps.
That is very cool.
Right. Okay. So I think that's what romance is, what takes sexual out of just that boring married sex.
Right.
It takes it out of the realm of just, and sexy fun, right, is my deal. It shouldn't just be sex. It shouldn't just be focused, goal-oriented on orgasm and stuff. But so romantic intimacy takes it out and puts it into something new. I say for men, they don't usually think of what's romantic because men aren't taught to be romantic. So for men, I say substitute what's hot. What's hot? Because that's where a guy will be like, oh, right, it's hot, i.e. romantic, if you're in a car or you go to a football game and she wears a skirt with no underwear, or that she's not wearing a bra someplace. Right. Wouldn't that, right? So that's hot. That's romantic. Suddenly you're doing something, even if you have season tickets, but suddenly this game is different. This is hot. And that's cool. With or without an orgasm, it's hot. And so that can be, right? You don't have to be stroking somebody. You don't have to be really even touching them to have this romantic air.
Right.
I say, for me, one night I was in Hawaii, looking on the beach by myself. The wind is blowing. I'm feeling it all over my skin. The stars are out. I'm listening to the waves crash. I've got my favorite drink. I'm like, this is so blissfully romantic. And it was so intimate. And it was so, so good. And that's the thing, when you stop and pause and notice it, right? And even all by yourself, when I'm happy in my body, I'm happy emotionally. I wasn't going, oh, I'm alone. I wasn't mad somebody else wasn't there. I was just, I'm glad to be here. This is awesome. So that romance, I think, is key and gets overlooked. And we can do it in all sorts of little fun, easy ways.
Another example that I've seen, with two points I want to make. Jackie will leave me little Post-it notes like in the refrigerator, how much I love you, looking forward to seeing you later today. Just little things like that. And that really, to me, is romantic.
Yes.
And it was her birthday recently, and I had bought her this little dress, and she tried it on and brought it out. What that dress did to me, I mean, I
was
did
hot.
not. Yeah.
Yes, right? Exactly.
And it was 8:00 in the morning, but that was not stopping us.
Oh, right.
So that's romantic. And I never really
Yes.
thought of it being that way.
No, I didn't either.
Yeah. And frankly, just putting on a sexy dress at 8 a.m.
Yeah.
That's a surprise. That's unexpected.
It is.
And
It was
yeah,
unexpected,
so
yeah.
very romantic. Very cool.
And you brought up a really important point too, is when we can climb outside of our sexuality or what we view sex in marriage, I think can so oftentimes be put in the column of a task
Yes.
or a job.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
To-do list.
what's the fun of that? I mean, because it's in the same category as doing the dishes, or cleaning out the garage.
Right.
And
Ugh.
right. And I think for a lot of women, that can be a culprit because there's not enough conversation taking place about just our own sexuality and being able to embrace that. So it becomes, at least in my generation, it was much more focused on the men and making sure that they're pleasured, and not so much myself. So that has been a huge transition in this relationship that I have with John, is because he was always much more about, what do you want? What pleases you? At first I was like, holy crap, I have no idea.
That is so common.
Right?
So common.
Like,
Women
I didn't
will say,
know.
I don't have any fantasies.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, honey.
Yeah,
Let's get to those.
Right?
Give me a challenge. I like a
Right?
challenge.
Right?
Yeah.
And being able to learn, I heard somewhere or read somewhere that this one woman, what she used to do when it came to having intercourse, sex, that thing, she says, I stopped looking at it as a task and began looking at it as a vacation.
Yeah.
And since being able to really feel that, just like you were on the beach in Hawaii, where you get to just absorb all that beauty that's taking place because you are choosing to be in that, it makes a huge difference. When I started having sex from a space where I wanted to be in it, where it was like my goal to have that feeling at the end, it changed the whole game.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't have to think about the dishes. I didn't have to think about the garage. I didn't have to think about, what bills needed to be paid or anything like that, because that was always going to be there. This was an opportunity for me to just, see ya. I'm going to be gone for an hour. I'm going to La La Land.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then, Beth, you mentioned that thing. You mentioned your experience in Hawaii. And does that lead us into the spiritual intimacy? Because that seemed really spiritual to me, how you described that.
Yeah. So it's funny because I can see where you would think that, but no, it's actually just what Jackie said.
Oh.
And so here's the thing. When you read, probably there are people who talk about spiritual intimacy and they liken it to what I call spiritual alignment. They'll be like, oh, both people are Jewish or both people are Christians or both people believe in this or that and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, that's alignment. Totally different. There are a lot of other Jewish people. I can be aligned with them, but it's not intimacy.
Yeah.
The intimacy is, so if you think about, well, here, let me tell you how I came up with this. All right. I was working with a couple who had their 25th wedding anniversary. They had planned a big trip, but they didn't get to take the big trip because Harvey wiped out their home and they didn't have enough money. So they wound up with me, finding me and stuff. And they'd been married since high school. They both grew up small town Texas, religious background. And so what's happening? They love each other. Beautiful couple too, both beautiful. Kids love each other. And yet every time he's asking her for something sexual, she's hearing, good girls don't do that.
Yeah.
He must not respect me.
Yeah.
Right.
This is not what my preacher said was okay. My mother told me don't do this, right? Good girls don't do this. And so even though she loved her husband, she didn't free herself. It would be like if Jackie was like, no, every time I want to have sex and say, I'm going to take an hour off. No, I'm feeling guilty. I should be doing the laundry. I should be doing this.
Yep.
So I say spiritual intimacy is this belief, this knowledge, this confidence that loving this person, that being intimate with them in all of these ways is good for you, good for them, good for your families or people around you, good for the world at large. And I say blessed by whatever your version of the divine is. If you believe in the universe, if you believe in Mother Nature, if you just believe whatever, fine. But all of those things, that it's okay. So you can be wholehearted about it.
Yeah.
And so people who are non-monogamous but aren't ethical about it,
Yeah.
there's a part of them, unless they're a sociopath, they know they're doing something that isn't okay. They know they're hurting somebody, right? There's a little chunk that spiritual intimacy is not there.
Yeah.
And it's always going to be a little bit less. And they can try again to have great sexy to make up for it and everything. But that's still there. But we can even be, lately, one of the ones that really bothers me is older couples where one person's in a nursing home and they were happily married, but now one person's out of it. Alzheimer's isn't really the same person. And their spouse, they have lived, the ones I've known, 10 years or so without their partner. And they fall in love with somebody else. They start having a sexual relationship. That spiritual intimacy, they're feeling guilty and ashamed and bad and hiding it. And it costs them. And it's so sad and it's not deserved.
Yeah.
So things like that. So that's spiritual intimacy is a huge part, and people don't recognize it, but it's what stops us from fully appreciating and savoring everything else.
Yeah. I mean, because there's no way you're going to be able to throw your head back in ecstasy if you're
feeling shame, guilt,
or thinking like what food you need to go buy at the grocery store. I mean,
yes,
let go of that. I mean, but like you said, if you carry around your own stigma and your own judgment about what it is that you're doing, it's not going to make any difference what anybody else is doing for you.
That's right.
It's not going to fix it. And, yeah.
And then with that, for example, even with self-pleasure, right? And this is why I'm saying that until we have this level of intimacy with ourselves, right? Which means that we accept our bodies and we love our bodies.
Yeah.
Even when they're not perfect. When you accept your emotional state, that I can be a bitch sometimes, or I can be angry or whiny or this, but I can still love myself.
Yeah.
That I can enjoy sexual pleasure and that's okay. That I can create romance and enjoy romance by myself. And that all of that is okay. Yeah. That's the part that I'm okay. Until you have that by yourself, it's really freaking almost impossible to have it with a partner. Let alone multiple partners.
Yeah.
Right. And I think what happens in the swinging world is that oftentimes there are people, right? They try swinging because they're trying to heal something, but they think that just by having more sex with different people, somehow it's going to really improve things. We've talked about this, as well as I do. That's not going to work until they have a good relationship together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Swinging isn't going to help things.
No,
Yeah.
for sure not.
And it's back up. So until you have it by yourself. So you have to have it by yourself, then with your partner. And then if you want, you can be as open and everything also. And you bring that to it. So,
right. But it's about teaching people that they can do that is a possibility, that they can have a relationship with themselves.
Yes.
Yeah. And Beth, if people want to learn more about this, where would they go?
The best place to go is to BethDarling.com.
Okay.
BethDarling.com. And you can sign up for my email list and there'll be, I don't know, you'll get something, whatever's up there at the time in terms of what they get sent, whether it's reasons to have sexy fun or whether it's conversation starters or some date night ideas or something. There's always sign up for the email. And and then you'll also get noticed when this book comes out because we'll give a whole lot of ways for people to work on improving. So for example, if people are separated physically, can't have physical intimacy for jobs or whatever, there are all sorts of different ways that we can help create that. And stuff that I think are really potent and
when Jack and I got together, we weren't in the same
together.
state, and so we got intimate on the phone.
Yeah,
in all kinds of ways.
Yes, I love it. Yes.
And then so you have this new book coming out.
Yeah.
But you do have this book that's already out, which is a fantastic book. Can you touch on it just a little bit about what it's about?
Yeah. So Love and
where
Laughter.
They can order it.
Yeah, Love and Laughter, sexy, meaningful fun for everyone. They can order on Amazon, the Kindle edition. It's out of print right now, but that is sort of my story. It was the story of how I went from this person who really didn't like my body, was mortified by my desires, and how to figure out what options there are. Because I think otherwise what happens is we just you know what you know. We know English and that's it. And you know, if somebody doesn't tell you, oh, there's Spanish also, we don't even know. So we're not choosing English. That's just, we're stuck there.
Right.
And I think that's what happens with a lot of people is that they're stuck and they don't know how to start opening themselves up to receiving and to pleasure and to love. And so that's why I wrote that first book. And it really is my sister read it and told me, she's like, oh my God, it was like just listening to you talk. And I was like, so if I've driven you nuts in this, don't read the book. But otherwise, it's very straightforward. And what I did, like a lawyer friend of mine told me that it was like a sex language translator.
Yeah,
and because
it really is. It's a great book. It's layman's terms, right? You can grab hold of what it is that you're talking about and be like, oh, okay, that's tangible. Yeah. That's something I could actually do. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I
like that pragmatic. Like I said, it's that logical part of my brain that's like, wait, we need to be able to understand this more. And we just, when it comes to love, sex, and relationships, we have not yet put things together in very straightforward, simple terms. So that was, kind of consider that like my introduction to yourself and your body and sexy pleasure. And then the 5 kinds of intimacies, I think, are, knock on wood, I think they're really instrumental in relationships, whether relationship with yourself and others. And even, frankly, with kids and things. And people are like, well, but what about sexual? Like, don't have sex with your kids. I was like, absolutely true. Right? That's not it. But again, sexual intimacy is about sort of recognizing somebody's sexuality and acknowledging and opening space up for your children to be this being that it's kind of awkward. I mean, I know I've got 5 kids and I was like, wait. The first time they come out of a bedroom with somebody, I'm like, oh, this is so weird.
But the benefit of being able to have those conversations with your kids is like nothing I've ever experienced.
No doubt about it.
I mean, there is an honesty there and a depth of
intimacy
that really bonds you together. And so there's a dependability there that this person's going to have my back.
Right. Yeah. And you don't have to be totally you just have to sort of acknowledge that they're there and that we can have these, even if they're awkward conversations, the door's open.
That these matter.
I'm not closing my eyes. I'm not seeing you.
Right.
And we saw it with somebody who was gay or bisexual. Like, oh, well, we're not even going to talk about that. Right. We're going to pretend like that's not any part of the conversation. Well, that's a wedge.
It is.
And just recognizing who they are. Yeah. Is an intimacy and opens the door. It furthers emotional intimacy, all these things. So,
Beth, it's been great talking to you today about intimacy. It's a pleasure, and we look forward to talking to you again in the future because we have great conversations with Beth. And if you want to find out about upcoming podcasts with Beth, go to openlove101.com, sign up to our email list, and we'll be sure to send you out notifications of upcoming videos and maybe blogs. So thanks for joining us today.
See ya.
Dang, I learned a lot from that video. Subscribe, and you can learn a lot more.